If everybody could take their seats. In this next block of instruction, it's going to be a quick and dirty overview of the seduction community, as many of you have come to know it before you arrived at our doorstep. Quick review of what the dollar figures the cottage industry as a whole has been generating over the past decade or so, what kind of exposure that it's gotten in society at large, and how our approach has pretty much marginalized any hope of the industry maintaining its pole position as the primary source of attraction and seduction training now and in the hereafter. All right, let's get started. Conveniently titled, Fucked Over. First part of this, as I said, we're going to go through a brief history of the seduction community. All right, so where did all this come from, right? Where exactly did the idea of a codified system to attract and seduce women really come from? Okay, well, a lot of people in the industry, when you ask them the question, they'll cite literary figures like Casanova or Don Juan. Literary figures, yes, they were supposed to be based on real people, but there's really not a lot of evidence to show that they actually existed. Of course, there had to be figures like them, but those guys, we don't really know. That we can't really speak to. And honestly, it's not really relevant to what we're about to talk about. So if that's your starting point, great. If not, here's a straight dope. Now, the farthest back that we can trace the community's origins is to the crib notes that were kept by fraternities and other secret societies that really came into prominence in the 1950s. The term pickup itself is probably, as far back as our research shows, coined by the Department of Defense, then referred to as the War Department, in anti-VD and other, newsreels dedicated to the sexual health of GIs during World War II. They didn't have the bandwidth to treat basic STDs, so they engaged in these media campaigns where they vilified women in the occupied territories in Southeast Asia and Europe. And when GIs were trying to ploy these girls with like nylons and chocolate, they really didn't want them, getting burnt. So they invented the term pickup. Now those guys came home from the war, went to college, a lot of them on the GI Bill, and by the 1950s, you see these documents starting to surface in fraternal organizations and secret societies that are dedicated to basically passing on the knowledge that these guys developed when they were trying to pick up these women in foreign places and cultures. Now, these crib notes, as they're referred to, were like physical, analog, handwritten, or maybe even typewritten notes passed down from senior members of these organizations down to the junior members and the initiates. And they were basically just detailed descriptions of the methods that their forebears used in their experiential learning process, okay? If it worked for the first guy, he wrote it down and then passed it along to the new guys. It kind of gave them like a social edge over the regular chodes that were like, just tooling around campus. Wasn't very scientific or very precise, but at least it was a start, right? So organizations like Skull and Bones at Yale, Delta Kappa Epsilon, Franklin Society, etc., they would protect this stuff because obviously at the time, culture couldn't handle any of it. It would have been total anathema. So that kind of got brought into their body of secret knowledge. The key point to understand at this point is that what was happening was they were condensing what they had learned, their personal experiences, and then transmitting it over time from peer group to peer group. Okay, it was like, the very seedling stages of the hive mind that we have today. Now, the next milestone that, our methodology and our shop identifies is really the rise of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. It's really at the root of the way that the community developed from 1970 forward. NLP was started by a couple of guys, a guy named Richard Bandler and Dr. John Grinder. They were both self-help speakers, touchy-feely self-help types. And what they did was, when they were developing NLP, the climate was perfect to capitalize on the rising popularity of psychotherapy as the new pop culture religion. You know, people really starting to get familiar with Freud and Kant and all these different people that were talking about self-actualization. So the meme had already been put out there that psychology was a thing and that it could be harnessed. People just really didn't have a good feel for exactly how, why, or to what end. So Bandler and Grinder created this quote-unquote method that they claim to have developed as a way to use language, linguistics, as a tool to directly and effectively modify human behavior. Now, their original claim was that they had figured out a way to treat phobias and depression and psychosomatic illnesses, which you don't even hear about anymore because it's happened so minuscule that it's almost laughable. They were basically making the claim that they could heal psychological disorders by harnessing a fictional connection between the input of language into someone's thought process and neural processes and the external output that them processing that message in the order that they gave it to them had. They believed that there was a pattern that would shake you out of your your deep-seated Freudian Oedipal complex, or you had these limiting beliefs because of your low self-esteem, quote unquote. That if they could use the right thing to motivate your behavior, that you would no longer have that. Today, with behavioral psychology evolved to the way it is now, it sounds pretty ridiculous, right? Yeah, well, it pretty much was. Every time what these guys put out has been peer-reviewed or evaluated in academia, it's been, it's labeled as pseudoscience at best. They use a lot of scientific terminology, but it never stands up to any kind of rigorous testing. But turns out, when you tell someone that they can intentionally manipulate human behavior by saying a certain set of magical words in a certain magical sequence, it sells. Go figure. Anyway, these guys were both at their core seminar speakers. And seminar speakers get paid just like hired guns do. And they were working on their own bottom line. So when other snake oil vendors caught on to the idea that you claim to apply this stuff to seduction, it spread like wildfire. I mean, right? Seriously? I mean, who's not going to want to, know how to do that? I command you to remove your pants. Anyway, next up, we have probably the first real codified seminal work put out by the seduction community as we know it today. And that was How to Pick Up Girls by Eric Weber. Now, as of February of 2013, there were still 3 million copies of this book in print. So, it's still popular to this day. Not quite sure why, as I'll show you in a second. Now, this thing was written in 1970. Didn't really pick up and take off into 1980s. I don't really know what the publishing status of it was, if one of the regular, Manhattan imprints picked it up like Simon & Schuster, or if it was just a vanity print and just got, sold through classified ads. I have no idea. Doesn't really matter. The thing to pay attention to, though, again, kind of falls in line with that whole 1970s, post-Vietnam War kind of pop culture impression of psychology and the way that it could be admitted. And it also brought in a little bit of the Gnostic aspect that the guys who were preserving crib notes had. The guys in the 1950s that were working from crib notes thought that since they were special for being in their fraternal organizations and secret societies, they had been given an edge on the common guy. Okay, RSD guys would call him a chode. You're smarter than the chode. You've already got an advanced social understanding. The 1950s guys thought they had it because they were members of secret societies. In the 70s, you got guys that are practicing NLP. They think they've got the magic formula to be as successful as they want to be and live out their adolescent fantasies. Now you have How to Pick Up Girls, born of that culture, getting really popular in the 1980s. And at this point, psychology and popular culture is, it's becoming king. Um, Everybody's got a therapist. People are really, like working on issues. Divorces are rising, so you have, people going to therapy as couples. It's being discussed in popular media. It's really taken off. Anyway, you can tell by looking through Weber's book that he's really not a literary type. He's really just a guy, trying to, bring what he thinks he knows to the masses. Let me give you a couple of quotes. Quote, "The point of this story is not that the girl was, quote, bad, or, quote, fast, or, quote, avant-garde. All it indicates is that normal, healthy young chicks like sex. They want sex. And most important, will be glad to have sex with you if you only ask them." Here's another good one. "They're showing you their breasts and behinds to stimulate you, to make you want to go to bed with them, to get you to caress and fondle their lovely behinds and soft, warm breasts." This guy really had a handle on it. Beyond, his philosophical ruminations about, the nature of female adornment, etc., he does start to codify, some tactics. At one point, he suggests, dude, just go to an anti-war rally, even if you're pro-war. I've laid a bunch of chicks just by pretending that I was, against the war and progressive. And, he's got some great lines in here, too. Here's one of his, I guess you could call it an escalation line at this point. So here's the quote. "Somebody so absolutely stunning, so downright sexy. You actually find yourself running to catch up with her. For an instant, you even consider rape." Bring up rape. That'll go over real well. That's dynamite stuff. I love it. Anyway, moving on. The next major leap forward in the spread of the community as a subculture occurs here in 1989 with the debut of Speed Seduction. Probably got half the room here has got some Speed Seduction materials already downloaded. At least the guys that are, like recovering PUAs. Now, Speed Seduction was a system that was put out by the illustrious and venerated Messiah, Mr. Ross Jeffries. Another accomplished practitioner of the NLP pseudoscience. Ross is like the first guru that ever was. Now, what he claimed to have innovated when he put out Speed Seduction was that in addition to being able to use, excuse me, to use NLP to pre-program a subject to do what you wanted, he claimed to have also included an element of hypnosis in the Speed Seduction system. So what he was really going for at this point was a series of patterned language that would manipulate a target's thought-making process. Which, if you think about it, obviously we're very morally promiscuous. We don't impose our ethics on anybody. But, if it really worked and it was really just that easy, there really wouldn't be, much fun, in doing it. Granted, it would be gratifying as hell. You could have sex whenever you wanted, but that really put a lot of people off. But it also drew a lot of people in. Again, if you look at a lot of the videos of Ross's like small seminars that he did, in Southern California and all the different places that he's been to teach, you can see him, just like his forebears in NLP, kind of like adopting pop culture to make his message more palatable and more deliverable and believable to the guys that he was teaching. You got videos where he's doing kung fu moves to accentuate his points. He's got a sweet Indiana Jones hat in one of them, along with the standard late '80s garb. I've even seen a couple of lectures he gave where he had a crystal around his neck, talking about the healing power of crystals. I mean, a lot of it is just really out there, Southern California, normal stuff. Having used some Speed Seduction patterns myself in the field, I can tell you from personal experience that a lot of them are effective. I can't really tell you how or why. And I know that there's no science to back it up. Probably had a lot more to do with me and a couple other guys you're going to hear from. Just having a firm grip on memorizing what we were going to say. I remember spending like hours on like a Thursday afternoon after work, like trying to memorize a pattern, and then like putting it to work at like public. It pulled. I don't know what to tell you, but the key piece of Ross in the development of the community is really the marketing frame that Speed Seduction was put into. I think the line was, "Get any woman steaming hot in minutes." Yeah, okay, not really. But you know what? Hey, the sales pitch sold. And, to this day, he's still a conference speaker. Whenever there's an event available for him to make a buck and they've got a slot, everybody acts like, "Oh, I'm so honored Ross Jeffries is coming." Personally, I don't really blame him. He has an army of anti-socials for about 20 years now, holding him up as their sexual messiah. I'd probably do it too. Now, that's like, what, one, two, three of you probably remember in '89 when Speed Seduction was like really just breaking onto the scene and really getting out to this little subculture. Personal computing was kind of still in its infancy. It was like the age of the Commodore 64 or the Commodore 128. Yeah, of course you don't remember. Like, what, 6? But yeah, personal computing was in its infancy, and the way that you traded information in those days, even though you had a personal computer, was on floppy disks. And it was like a big deal if you had like 2 floppy drives, because then you could like copy games or copy text files or copy. The Anarchist Cookbook was a really big thing for you to add to your floppy disk collection. Just strange stuff like that, stuff that was countercultural, wouldn't have made it in the modern media. Stuff that was specific to the computing community. Anyhow, at this point, the community is basically spreading beyond what Speed Seduction could just reach, with in-person seminars. Now, eventually, all right, yeah, dude, this clicker's busted. Yeah, just I don't know, fucking fix the break. Okay, all right, so the community was spreading beyond just what Speed Seduction could reach with in-person seminars. Now, eventually, a hacker type, a guy named Kevin Mitnick, who was a student of Ross Jeffries, launched a Usenet group called alt.seduction.fast. Usenet groups were kind of like the great-great-granddaddy of an online message forum. This is back in the days of mainframe computing. A server, was like massive, took up a lot of space. You had to dial into it. You had to have access to it. GUIs, graphic user interfaces, weren't the greatest. Things, third and fourth generation languages didn't exist yet. So, like the Gnostic knowledge of the 50s and practitioners of NLP and eventually, Speed Seduction acolytes, guys that could actually get onto alt.fast seduction for the first time, not only in human history, but in community history, they were gaining the ability to really congeal a sort of like hive mind around the common problem that everyone was trying to solve. It was the first time that people would have like an open forum type conversation and still enjoy a great deal of geographical arbitrage. You could have a guy on alt-fast seduction that was talking to guys that were going into the field in Hollywood and compare that to his experiences in Chicago or Cleveland or, wherever. To this day, you can actually still go out and find some of those earliest conversations. Frankly, they have a lot of value, even if you're not, a hardcore hobbyist. It's got a lot of insights. It gives you the perspective that a novice is a novice is a novice, no matter how far they develop their skill level. Anyway, where are we? Okay, we're at fast seduction. All right, Cliff's List. Now, with alt.seduction.fast coming out in '94, when people are really starting to get online in mass with dial-up, you have the Cliff's List Seduction newsletter that comes out 4 years later in '98. This is huge, right? By 98, you have like T1 networks that are really starting to make their way into like major universities. Schools are getting them. Dial-up is getting faster. You can buy faster modems, so you can download more. The Cliff's List newsletter, Seduction newsletter, is really like the next evolution forward, broadening the community to a much wider audience. It was transmitted via email, so anybody with an email could forward it to anybody else. It's like plain text. You're not getting a lot of major bandwidth screw ups. And the doctrine is actually moving from an elite inside of the community out to like the rest of the boots on the ground, if you will. Now, with the proliferation of the Seduction newsletter, it's really at this point that we see not really the marriage, but the engagement of Seduction community seminarism, soliciting guys to pay for training on how to get laid, and kind of moving toward the marriage of the idea of internet marketing and seduction training as a general idea. If Cliff's List newsletter hadn't been as successful and proliferated as it was, probably wouldn't have the community as we have it today. So right there you have the progression of the modern community from really its conception within the Cribs Notes in the 1950s through its adaptation to popular culture, all the way up to the point at which the information age really started to flourish, and we see the marketing really begin to really outpace the way the community is developing. Okay, learning to fuck for fun and profit. So if that was the community from conception to infancy, the movement from infancy to adolescence is actually, you'll find a lot more in common with this period. Okay, so by 99, a year after Cliff's List Seduction newsletter comes out, you see the registration of fastseduction.com as a URL. Now it's moved from a discussion board to a discussion board in a clearinghouse of information. It's like an online library, fastseduction.com. Now, we don't have a lot of visibility into when or how much information from the original Usenet group was released with fastseduction.com. Excuse me. The key point to note, though, is the evolution of the online community as personal computing and personal internet access are developing alongside the community coming out of its infancy. It's also beneficial to note that the acceleration in the community's development and the wider proliferation between phases of the community's advancement, they're getting smaller and smaller in time increments from here on out. Now, once Fast Seduction had a .com made from the roots of the Usenet group, internet marketing guru Evan Pagan, some of you know him by his community name, David D'Angelo, released what he referred to as the, quote, cocky funny method on his own URL, wyourdating.com. If you have any questions about that and how much fun that was, get with me after the break. I actually have a really great story being in college reading wyourdating.com. Anyway, that same year, in keeping with tradition, wyourdating.com became an in-person seminar. Shortly thereafter, the W Your Dating ebook basically went viral. I think it's pertinent here to note that at this point, information about the community and about the community's techniques really rounded a corner. At its core, this is where the internet marketing really, really takes hold. Evan Pagan to this day has a long list of videos that he uses as instructional materials to help people buy his information products and to market him as a personal brand, holding up wyourdating.com as this great success and source of wealth in his life. Seeing it for me was a pretty disillusioning moment. particularly because I had lived with this idea that Double Your Dating had like provided me um, with like the basis of game that I needed. Um, before our research kicked off and we really got into tradecraft. Anyhow, next up is in 2003. The legendary dopeness of the world famous Project Hollywood, I'm sure, is not lost on anybody here. It was the crucible within which the majority, if not all, of the big names of any import in the business first emerged. With each with their own specific spin and individual style with regard to the establishment of a systematic approach. Without Project Hollywood, we would not have a community as we know it today. It really was probably the first time that a social experiment was really undertaken that could actually apply some kind of continuous improvement to the students and teachers that were there. It had every hallmark of a military organization. They're segregated from society. They've got a common task, a common purpose, and a common skill set. And they're all sharing best practices as part of this like learning organization. And frankly, they did it right, man. They went to a glamorous spot filled with hot, dumb girls, and anybody and everybody who came in was welcome, which arguably is what led to its downfall. But that kind of brings us up to, the almost adulthood of the community as we know it today. Now, Project Hollywood ultimately did have a downfall. It eventually fell apart. Okay, so you have the guys are all living together. You got all the big names: Mystery, Love Drop, Style, Tyler Durden, Papa. God, everybody's there, right? Now, the same year that Project Hollywood started, 2003, the forerunner manuscript to what a lot of you have already read today, the Mystery Method, with Eric von Markovic and Chris Odom. The forerunner, the Venusian Arts Handbook, was a collaboration that was done during Project Hollywood between Eric von Markovic, Mystery, and a guy named Chris Odom. You probably know him as Love Drop. This is also the point in 2003 when another member of the Project Hollywood crew, Owen Cook, also known as Tyler Durden, put together the founding documents and incorporated what he called real social dynamics. If you read the account of RSD as it was founded, that was written by Neil Strauss, it sounds like he ripped everything off. I think with the tidal wave of bullshit that RSD has put out, I wouldn't rob them of the legitimacy that said that they had their own ideas. They definitely do. If you want to read about any of their ideas, go to the self-help section, and everything you read applied to games. If Tony Robbins wanted a blowjob, I'm sure I could have 7 or 8 guys from RSD that would line up and get on their knees. Anyway, so we've got the forerunner to the Mystery Method in a manuscript form. We've got RSD already put together in 2003. Now, at this point, so much money is exchanging hands in the Project Hollywood mansion. It became apparent to probably everybody present that it was time to start incorporating once Tyler Durden kicked his little enterprise off. By the end of the following year, von Markovic had developed such a huge following and such like a massive, gathering of disciples that he partnered with one Nicholas Benedict, aka Nick Savoy, to found what they affectionately titled the Mystery Method Corporation. Now, in 2004, a leak in the operational security of the house had led an independent female journalist to threaten outing the entire project on the national scale. She was going to write an article, have it published in the national media, draw a lot of attention. to the guys in the house as they were developing their methods. I think she may have known Neil Strauss and been professionally affiliated with him. Don't really know. Anyway, they caught wind that she was actually going to expose the house. So with exposure kind of looming on the horizon, much to the consternation of everybody else in the house, Neil preemptively wrote an article about what they had going on there. Everybody was terrified about what was going to happen. They were gonna, they were planning on, the Armageddon, completely ruin, their pussy-filled world. Turns out, even though Neil published an article and it did get national press, it didn't have the same kind of backlash going on that anybody had expected. In fact, people, basically viewed it as a curiosity, from what I saw. Anyway, fast forward to 2005. You have the release of The Game, Penetrating the Secret Society of Pickup Artists. It debuts as a New York Times bestseller. Now, Neil Strauss has already proven himself as I think at this point he had already done the Courtney Love bio, and he had already done How to Make Love Like a Porn Star with Jenna Jameson. So he's already a name that folks in the Flatiron District and the publishing community in New York already know. He's got a lot of street cred. Anyway, as you might imagine, being a New York Times bestseller, the members of the Project Hollywood House basically were elevated to the status of like the Illuminati. The following reached epic proportions. Conflicts over money and creative direction disputes, particularly inside of the Mystery Method Corporation, ultimately drove Von Markovic and Benedict, Mystery and Savoy, to sever their business connection. And as you can see here, following the break, Benedict, aka Savoy, founded what we know today as Love Systems, and Von Markovic went on to establish what we know today as Venusian Arts, LLC. What does it all add up to? Well, I can sum it up for you in 2 words. Big business. Now, we've got the 3 main companies that are obviously in control of the market. Okay. Quarterly bootcamp revenue by company. RSD, and this is just what we can see. Okay, quarterly, this is once every 3 months. RSD is pulling in $2.5 million. Love Systems, $1.2 million. Venusian Arts, not doing terrible. 32 grand, and last I checked, I think they have like maybe 4 or 5 coaches on rotation that are doing Venusian Arts boot camps. Annual revenue, RSD, you're looking at 10 million. Love Systems, 4.8, and Venusian Arts is like coming right in around 126. Okay. Now, as an industry, that means at least 15 million is going out the door to these guys just in training alone, in-person training where you're talking to a specific instructor for a specific period of time. They're filming everything, right? Obviously, RSD's probably got RSD and Love Systems have equivalent internet marketing campaigns where they're taking video and they're putting it out. RSD had a great gambit about 6 or 7 months ago with the Vegas free tour being put out on YouTube. So now you can go and you can take a look at the lecture portions of a lot of their training events. While they're collecting this money and while they're raking all of this stuff in, they're also generating content, which is a huge part of their marketing campaign. So guys that are paying them thousands of dollars for 4 to 5 days of training or just for a long weekend are becoming actors as a part of their internet marketing campaign. And all of this stuff is covered in releases. It's a brilliant business concept. If you look at it, great strategy, great execution, great application. But none of that takes into account the untold millions for book sales, DVD courses, audio books, audio courses, the money they pull in at conferences, their publishing royalties. I mean, we're talking about a lot of money. It's pretty easy to be a baller when you have this kind of core market forming itself under the guise of a quote unquote community. So, just like every other internet marketing based industry, credibility is the cornerstone to the heart of all of their marketing. So the media, the mainstream media, has pretty much eaten this up and commercialized these institutions and the community at large, mostly because it makes for great copy and human interest features. And everybody who's got a love and sex column, they're a go-to. They're always there, and they're always doing something new because they got to keep their brands and their products fresh. So, really, in 2013, the way that the outside world, if you will, kind of looks at the seduction community is just like a post-feminist curiosity. It's like, oh my God, there are guys that are doing this. And, every once in a while it'll pop up in the public eye and then it'll fade back out. So, what does that mean for us? Well, obviously, that's not how we roll. All right. Well, we've talked about, this special community as it's developed. We've kind of shown some of the divergence for practicality and actual science that have been done. And we've kind of illustrated the way that the community and the community's philosophies have kept pace with technology, and most importantly, how that linked to sales, accessing new markets, and the way that the three main players that are out there that are really successful commercial enterprises have come about. One thing we didn't talk about was the thousands of minor gurus and stuff like that, guys that are basically just rehashing the philosophy and the methods of the big three and all the founding members of the Project Hollywood House. Fact of the matter is, they've been repacking and rehashing the same attract, build comfort, and sexual escalate system the entire time. All it is, every time some new method or some new guru pops up, is a rebranding of that. That's it. And guys are going to pay for it. They're going to pay for it, and they're going to pay through the nose because, God damn it, they need the information. And, it's like a rat from a drowning ship. I mean, they've got to get to it. It's a really important part of their lives. We take a markedly different approach. Okay, if you read the manual and you've been through the core operational scenarios, you know this. Okay, first of all, when you learn our tradecraft, it's iterative, measurable, and learnable. Okay, and our model was not some pseudo-scientific psychological theory that maybe works but probably doesn't and could include hypnosis. No, this is actual, adapted, intelligence community tradecraft that's been proven on the battlefield. Okay, it's what helped us win the Cold War. They're techniques and dark arts that have been practiced for hundreds of years. Okay. More importantly, though, they're based in biological and social science, stuff you can prove. Okay, I challenge you to find an assertion in any of our training materials or anything in the manual that doesn't have a correlating psychological study or a correlating neurobiological study. Okay, they're based in fact. They're taught in fact, and all of the stuff that's been reverse engineered from Intel Community Tradecraft actually exists and actually works. Okay, if it didn't, we'd all be speaking Sputnik and trading in Deutschmarks right now. Okay. Another thing, we can guarantee, quote, confidence and, quote, good inner game because we'll teach you how to control the social elements and the social variables that everybody else just completely ignores. It is complete and total stage management. Okay? When I put an operative team into a venue, They're working like a well-oiled machine. They're incredibly good at clandestine communication. They all have a level baseline skill set that they can all rely on. And when the night is over, okay, normally when other guys are going home and banging on their keyboard, banging out a field report, I can take an operative team, I can put them in a room and go, okay, improve. And they have a systematized, codified way to really evaluate each other's skills along 4 very specific dimensions. And there's a learning culture inside of that small cohort that is going to get results. And the more they go out and the more rigorously they apply that learning process, the shorter the learning curve is. Okay, I've seen groups of 4 and 5 guys go from, dud to stud in, a little over 60, 70, maybe 90 days. Every last one of them. Huge social circle expansion. Okay, I'm talking about they're operating like an intelligence cell. It's absolutely beautiful to watch. And the most rewarding thing about all of it is the fact that these guys have been taken by this quote community, for a lot of money, and hopefully, we get to deliver some of that value back to them that's been taken, because the sales pitch is just too slick, and the need is just so great, that a lot of guys are willing to go in any length to actually get those skills.